For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Motsabi Hwayani. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner discusses Nobel Prize winner and former president of the ANC, Chief Albert Luthuli's Gospel of Service. Thank you so much for your time, Professor. In your column, why do you think it's relevant for us to be considering Chief Albert Luthuli so long after his death?
A lot of people complain that they don't have role models in South Africa today. And I've always been interested in Chief Luthuli. And when he says that in 1949, ANC members have been too slow to learn the gospel of service, it speaks directly into the situation we encounter today, where the notion of public service is viewed with cynicism. If someone says, I'm here to serve the people, people look cynically and they think you are really there to put public money into your own pockets. So in a sense, we have in Luthuli an example of a man whose life can show us an example that is different from the present. He was an elected chief in what is now KwaZulu-Natal, in Groutville. It's about 50, 60 kilometers from Durban, the Umvoti Mission Reserve. And he was one of the few chiefs who had criminal jurisdiction. Consequently, he was able to exact fines from people who were offenders, and he could have increased his income from that. He never took fines. He was sometimes approached by people about boundaries of land and offered some money, and he never took this. And now, according to the evidence I have. So what you have there is a person who decided to pursue a path that consciously was to benefit all of God's creatures, as he put it. And he lived it out. And I think this is very important for us today, to try, in spite of the overwhelming tendency in politics for people to serve themselves, to serve what he spoke of as serving God's will, holy and perfect, he understood as serving the people and their freedom. We need to reinculcate in the people of South Africa this type of gospel.
You refer to Luthuli combining rationality and passion. Is that not a philosophical question, and does it have a practical meaning for politics today?
You see, what we have nowadays is there are quite a few people who can still write about the valiant struggle of the ANC, the valiant struggle for liberation, 100 years of selfless struggle, and who can write theoretical arguments. Now, what is interesting about Chief Luthuli, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and some other people is that they had an idea, the idea of freedom. They had complicated ideas about how to achieve it. And very many people have these ideas. They are learned in biblical texts, or they learn it in theories. Now, the question that Luthuli's life raises for us is how you combine rationality and passion. Now, this is a question of spirituality. It's not necessarily tied to religion. It is a question that we all ask ourselves. We face crossroads in our lives on a regular basis. Do we decide to do what is right, or will we take a shortcut and do what is easiest for us and which may be lucrative? Now, Chief Luthuli was deposed as a chief because the government said to him, choose between the liberation struggle and being a chief. He refused to do so. He then made this famous statement where he ends off by saying, I do not know what the future holds for me. It may be banishment, ridicule, or death. But the road to freedom is via the cross. So he was prepared to make hard decisions from which he would suffer. Now, not all of us have to have life imprisonment like Mandela or die, but we have to make difficult decisions. And I think that's what I mean by combining rationality and passion.
And then, Professor, you mentioned how Chief Luthuli was both a Christian and a chief. Wasn't this contradictory?
It's quite an interesting question, because one of the issues that arise in South Africa today is how do we treat diversity? How do we recognize that someone is entitled to pursue a particular religious belief? How do we treat being a chief as something backward? How do we relate to people's customs? All these things. Now, when Luthuli was a teacher at Adams College, they kept on sending a message asking him to come back and make himself available for election as a chief. He didn't want to do that because he was the breadwinner and he was having difficulty supporting them, and he would earn even less as a chief. Now, the basis on which he decided to become a chief related to how he understood his Christianity. He had reflected on his Christianity and decided that it was not purely a private matter, that my Christianity has to be lived out in relation to fellow human beings. Now, apparently these are two different worlds, the chieftaincy and Christianity. However, his decision to make himself available as a chief was based on his Christian beliefs. And he was a person who lived a number of different identities. He had a lot of respect for the Amabeshu, the so-called heathens, the non-believers. He would teach his children to listen to them. And amongst his council as a chief were many of these people. So what we can learn from Luthuli is that within one person and within all of us, there are a range of different identities. They can coexist, and we can have respect for all of them, and we can learn from all of them if we are open. Luthuli was also very open. He was not a communist, but he respected the advice of Moses Kotane. He was not a liberal, but one of the people who helped him with a lot of logistical arrangements was E.S. Reddy, who was a member of the Liberal Party. So I think there are a number of different things that relate to that question, which I think can teach us to be more tolerant, to respect different identities, to respect pluralism, which is one of the foundations of our constitutional order.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that insight. That was Professor Raymond Suttner discussing Chief Albert Luthuli's ethical leadership.